Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Hockey Writers Fantasy Forecheck podcast. I am your host, Jacob Strozyk.
And I'm Jacob Billington.
And today we're going to go through some of the goaltending options that you should consider taking for this upcoming year. Whether you're in one of those keeper or dynasty leagues and you're looking for improvements for your later years, or a redraft league where you kind of just want to grab some steals so you can, make your wins for this year. We're going to be doing a little trip around the league to kind of discuss all the different goaltending options for the upcoming year. Before we go right into that, I just want to ask my partner in crime here if he has any fun fantasy goalie stories, whether it be, any steals where you got a metric ton of points, or if there was a goalie that you were like, yeah, they're going to be my savior this year, and then they ended up blowing it. You got any fun ones?
I had to think about it. I don't really have many goalie stories. I'm usually like right in the middle of the pack with my goalies. But last year, I mentioned this in our first time together, but last year I picked up Ilya Sorokin in the second round, I believe. Fantastic pick. He was in contention for the Vezina the whole season. But I forgot about my other goalies. I picked up James Reimer at the end of the draft. Didn't work out too well. He was all right, but on a struggling San Jose team, he wasn't the goalie I wanted. So I did end up picking up Fyodor Kochetkov from Carolina. He was fantastic until he was sent to the AHL for half the year. And I was like, I need to hold on to him. He's going to get called up any day now, because looking at Antti Ranta and Freddie Anderson, they're both very injury prone. And so I'm like, he's going to be up any day now. Any day. And I kept holding on to him because I wasn't going to let him go for free. And he was never getting called up. And it burned me the whole year because I had to pick up another goalie off waivers and just kind of go week by week, see who's doing good, see who's not. And I held on to Kochetkov the entire year. And I just it hurt me because he was doing good in the NHL, but there was just no room for him.
Yeah, that's definitely a tough one, waiting for him. We're going to talk about it a little bit later for sure. For me, I had a double hitter last year in my bigger league that I play in, and thankfully I switched it and fixed it. But I had both Elvis Merzlikins and John Gibson. Let me just tell you, it was the worst decision I made to take goalies later on in the draft, as opposed to trying to take at least one in those mid rounds just to get some starter that would be better. Luckily, I fixed it and I ended up getting Vanacek and Swayman off waivers in that league. So I got a good turnaround on my goal.
I'd say. Well, and I got to give you credit. Like, those are two really good goalies not really good goalies, but really good goalies to take for like a big boomer bust. Like, both of them could have had great years last year, but it just didn't work out that way. So I will give you credit for kind of being bold on that. And those were two good picks that just didn't work out.
Yeah, it was highly unfortunate. So let's flip it right over. Let's talk about goalies that people should be picking up towards the high end of the draft. And we're talking I'd say top 2-3 rounds we're looking at here that you should be picking up one of these goalies. Depending on how deep your league is, you might be seeing these guys drop to like the 4th or 5th round if you are only in like a 6-7 man league or something. But these are the guys that I'd say you'd want to definitely pick up first. And at the top of my list is probably Igor Shesterkin, just because it's the Rangers. They've been good for a few years. They're going to keep being a good team for a number of years, and he's a huge part of that. So I think his fantasy numbers have been solid on top of his regular numbers. So he would be number one on my list if I was taking a goalie first round.
Yeah, I can respect that. I think that he should have won the Hart Trophy, not last year, but the year before. I can't argue with Matthews earning it either for a 60-goal season in, 10 years at that point since Stamkos. So you can't really argue with it. They were both the right pick. But I think he definitely still has that potential. Like, that doesn't just go away over a year. He didn't have as good of a year last year, but it was still a great year by any goaltender standard. So I disagree that he would be the first. My first would be Ilya Sorokin. If you're ready to move on to the next one.
No, we'll just go through them all. Let's go.
So Ilya Sorokin would be my first. He's a fantastic goaltender. He like his stats back that up and everything. But you also have to look at the Islanders as a whole with him. They're great defensively. Barry Trotz isn't there anymore, but that's okay. His system kind of still stuck with the team. And they have that extra bit of offense. Now, I'm not as high on the Islanders as a lot might be. I think that they're a good candidate to miss the playoffs this year. But Ilya Sorokin is my number one goaltender to take for fantasy. I'm not saying he's the best goalie in the league, but I'm taking him first for all my goaltenders.
I think you can make a case for best goalie in the league just based off of the numbers that you talked about, because the Islanders aren't an amazing team, but they're a good team. And he is definitely a huge part of what makes them a good team. So he's going to get wins in spite of them some nights, and he's going to have a high save percentage. He's going to have a fairly low goals against like he has for the past bunch of years. So Sorokin is high up on my list as well, but he would probably be at number 3 for me. Number 2, just for the sake of wins and who he is as a goaltender, would probably be Vasilevsky. It's Tampa Bay. They're still the same team pretty much as they have been for the past however many 5-6 years. So he's arguably one of the best goaltenders in the world, if not the best. Again, we can have that argument at some point later on this year. But for fantasy, being on Tampa, you get wins. Being Vasilevsky, you're going to steal games. He's going to have a good goals against. He's going to get a lot of saves because Tampa isn't, incredible defensively, but they're still very good defensively. So they don't let a lot of high percentage shots through, but they still let enough shots through that you're going to get a good amount of saves out of Vasilevsky too. So he would be my number 2.
Yeah, and it's hard to disagree with that. Like I think he is by far the best goalie in the NHL. Again, I would take Sorokin first in fantasy, but I do think Vasilevsky is the best goalie in the NHL, especially when it comes to playoff time where it really matters the most, because I think you put anybody in net and Tampa's getting to the playoffs. I do think that they're going to take a little bit of a step back this year. They're kind of on that downtrend. They're going to start going on that downtrend, sorry. But like come playoff time, you don't want anybody but Vasilevsky. But yeah, you can't go wrong in the regular season. He's a great goalie, but not like the best in the league in the regular season. But that's because his workload is just so high. Interesting. I'll be interested to see how many games he plays this year, because he's like one of the higher games played for goalies. So you're going to get all of those like you talked about.
Yeah, he's always on that high end for games played. So getting wins is definitely, if your league values wins, Vasilevsky should be higher up on your list.
Yeah.
I put Sorokin right around 3, and we kind of already went through him. Someone who would be fairly close and a team that I feel is on a nice big upswing would be the Stars. So I would take a really hard look at Jake Oettinger for another one of my possible first round goalie picks.
Yeah, I like Oettinger a lot. I think I'm not as high on him yet as a lot of other people. Obviously, his playoff run against the Calgary Flames 2 years ago was phenomenal. One of the best goaltending performances in a round we've seen. But I need to see one more year in the regular season to really be sold. Obviously, he had a great year last year. It's not that I don't think he's good enough. I just need to see if he can do it consistently. But he's definitely worth taking that risk in one of the higher rounds.
I just like the way that Dallas kind of formats their defense. They really play a supportive style for Oettinger, and they don't really give up, like I said, those really high percentage shots a lot. And even when they do, he's got the skill that he can still make that save, similar to Shesterkin, Sorokin, and Vasilevsky. I don't think he's as high as those 3. I think the top 3 Russians there really would take the cake, but I personally wouldn't be upset if I'm sitting with like the last pick in the first round and I'm really going, should I pick a forward or a goalie? And Ottinger's still sitting there. I still might make that consideration.
Yeah, I can't argue with you at all. Wouldn't personally be my pick there, but like I don't have an argument to back that up. I don't know.
Next on your list.
UC Saros for sure. I would have Saros over Ottinger there. He's
Okay.
on a team that who knows how they're going to end up. Obviously, they traded Johansson and bought out Duchesne. Who
And
knows where
Nashville's
they're
going to be
going
interesting this year.
to be very interesting. They have the goaltending and the defense that will win them games. I don't love their forward group. Obviously, we didn't even really get to see their full forward group last year. At the end of the year, they had like 5 or 6 AHL guys or prospects in their lineup that were most people look at them and they're like, who are any of you? But
Yeah.
like they were still winning games. They were in the playoff push right till the end. I'm not sure if they got better or worse. Kind of did some addition by subtraction with Duchesne and Johansson. Both were still quality players, just not at that contract. They did use that money. They picked up Ryan O'Reilly. I love that move. Luke Shen, he's going to help with their defense. And I think that UC Saros is in a great position to have a good year. They got better defensively, again, with Shen and Ryan O'Reilly. I don't know. I don't know if they're playoff bound. They're going to be in the hunt, and Saros is going to carry them there.
Yeah, I like Saros for fantasy, even for the past like 2, 3 years almost. He's just defied the odds as far as like, well, Nashville isn't a great team, but Saros is a great goaltender. So you really have to weigh that option of, do you take the player despite the team, or do you just hope that player is good enough to make that team so much better? And I think Saros definitely is one of the few goalies in the league that does that. So from a fantasy perspective, being on a more, average team, there might be some extra shots given up. So he might be higher on the save category, but he might be slightly lower in the win category. So you'll need to really think about what you want out of him as a goaltender. I think he'd be more of a second round pick as opposed to a first rounder for fantasy draft. So still worth taking very high. I'm going to agree with you. But somebody I would take maybe slightly higher than him, just based off of he's a good goaltender on a very good team, would be Freddie Anderson.
Ooh.
Yes, injury trouble. Yes, it's a risk, but I think as a higher second round pick, Anderson would be a little bit more worth it just because of how good Carolina is. They didn't really get any worse this offseason. So they're still basically the same team. And during the regular season, they always get a bunch of wins. They are always good defensively. And Anderson gets his wins constantly. He has, even all the way back to his Anaheim days. He was always getting wins. So I think he's just a good, consistent goaltending option, especially for winning games. So I would take him slightly higher than Saros for that reason.
I think that is a flaming hot take, but I don't even hate it. Like I really like Freddie Anderson. If he can play 50 games, then he's going to have a fantastic year. It's just a matter of, is he going to cap out at 40 games? Like where's his health going to let him go? And obviously with Ranta and Kochetkov under contract, who knows what that's going to look like throughout the year with that trio. But no, I love that pick. I'm a huge fan of Freddie Anderson. I love the Carolina Hurricanes and what they've done. And I think they've gotten significantly better over the offseason. They didn't lose anybody major. Max Pacioretty, they lost the whole 2 games they got out of him.
Still might get Tarasenko too.
They're still in on Tarasenko. They're still in on Erik Karlsson. They just they're a great team already. And now they're adding the firepower that they need. And adding Dmitry Orlov, fantastic two-way defenseman. He's really, really good offensively, but underrated defensively, I think. Anderson has a great team in front of him. He's going to be the starter on day one. It's his job to lose. So I do think that he is in a great position to, like you said, get a lot of wins, but also have a great save percentage because that's just what he does.
Yeah, he's just been consistent, and that's why I like him as a fantasy option. Just across his career, always consistent. I
Yeah.
have one more player on my top end of the list, and I have an asterisk next to him just because don't know if he's going to get moved, don't know if he's going to stay, but I have Connor Hellebuck in Winnipeg. If he stays, I'm not sure if he's worth taking early, maybe more towards the mid rounds, because I'm not sure how great Winnipeg is going to be based off of what they've done with their roster this offseason, and how Hellebuck doesn't really seem to want to be there anymore. He's, sounding based off of all of the, news and everything that he's ready to be traded, and there's a lot of rumors swirling where he might get traded. So if he gets moved to a better team, I think he's worth taking earlier. If he stays in Winnipeg for the extended part of the season, maybe till the trade deadline, I would be wary to take him early. I'm not saying don't take him. I'm just saying be wary of taking him early.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I would still take him pretty high. I think I'm higher on Winnipeg than most. Other than their center depth, they don't have a bad team at all. You can argue that they got better. Adding Iafallo and Velarde and even Kupari is an underrated piece. Keeping Nemesnikov kind of questionable, considering that his role on that team right now is the second line center. You don't want that. They do have good center depth. They have good centers. They just don't have a second line center. And with Hellebuck, I think it's more so he doesn't want to go through a rebuild than doesn't want to be in Winnipeg. Obviously,
You're right.
Who knows the direction of the team come the trade deadline? If they're out of the playoff hunt, are they going to sell off some pieces? Obviously, Nemesnikov is good for a 4th-round pick at the trade deadline every single year. Who knows? Who knows what they're going to do? I do think that they will be a better team than last year throughout the whole year. Because obviously they started really good last year, and I think Hellebuck is going to have a lesser workload, which is something he hasn't had in a long time. Because a lot of people forget that the Jets also got Laurent Brossoit, who had a good year in Vegas, especially at the beginning of the playoff run. So is he going to take on a bit of Hellebuck's workload, or I don't know? But I do think that Hellebuck is going to have a great year.
I think it might be smarter to play Brossoit for maybe about 25-ish games and reduce that workload on Hellebuck, so he only ends up with maybe about 60 games played. So I think that would just be better. I'm not disagreeing with you. They should still be taken high. I'm personally more wary just because someone's got to fall off, and I have just this gut feeling it might be Winnipeg as one of those teams that might drop off this year.
Fair enough.
All right. We're going to take a brief break here, and here is a message from the Hockey Writers.
Interested in writing for the Hockey Writers? If you have experience writing about hockey, are passionate about the sport, and are looking to take your writing to the next level, the Hockey Writers could be the place for you. Here at THW, you will have the opportunity to hone your craft at one of the world's largest and most respected hockey publishers. You will have control over what you write, be able to seek out media credentials, and be supported by a large network of writers and editors. Plus, you'll get paid for doing it. If you're interested and want to know more about team openings and requirements, please visit the Write for THW page on the Hockey Writers website. A link to that page is also listed in the description.
Okay, and we are back. We're going to jump directly into the next section, and that's goalies that we should probably try and pick up in those mid-low portions of your draft. We're talking rounds 5 through maybe 7-ish or even lower, depending on, again, how deep your league really is. But those mid to mid-low portions of your draft, and might be some hot takes in here, but the first one I'm going to put there is either Linus Ullmark or Jeremy Swayman. They function as a tandem, so I kind of link them together as far as which one you should pick up, because I really think for this upcoming year, they're going to split the season almost down the middle, and whoever is more hot is going to get more starts. Or if Ullmark gets injured, because he does have a minor injury history, especially from his Buffalo days, there's still a chance that, Swayman might end up with the higher end. So you would just want to weigh which one do you think would be more for your team in that respect. But I linked them both together. It's still Boston. They're still good. I'm not sure if they're still a playoff team. That's my hot take. But I still think them as a tandem in the Boston defensive system is fantastic for fantasy, because they're going to have all the right stats going for them.
Yeah, and I mean, Ullmark is bound to get taken higher than he really should. He's coming off of a Vezina year. He's going to get taken first 2 rounds, almost guaranteed, if you have a 12-man draft. I'm comfortable taking him in the 2nd or 3rd round. But I would also, like you said, I would look at Swayman just as much as Ullmark. Obviously, he had the fantastic year. Boston is not going to replicate their best season in hockey history. Just not going to happen. obviously they lost Bergeron and Krejci, plus a lot of other complementary pieces. They're not going to be the same. I
No,
feel like I said this last year and the year before. They're going to fall off any day now. I don't
we
know
were
if this
so
is-
wrong last year.
I know. I had them
We were
missing
all
the
so
playoffs
wrong.
last year.
Same,
I have
I
them-
did
yeah.
too.
Did I ever get slapped in the face with that one?
Yeah,
But
that's
no,
gonna
either one of them,
burn for a little bit.
perfect goalie that you can take. They're both going to have good stats. They're both going to have 20 or so wins. At least if they're splitting the season, they're both going to have 20 wins.
Yeah,
Swayman can absolutely take over. He's a fantastic backup. I'll put that in quotation marks. But yeah,
the 1B. He's not really. He's a starter that's stuck being a quote unquote backup.
exactly. So I'm comfortable taking them anywhere in the second to fourth round.
Another one, I think, while we're on the topic of tandems, we can jump over to Vegas, and that's Logan Thompson and Aiden Hill. I think Vegas is still a very good team. They're still going to get a bunch of wins, and the two of them, whoever ends up being the starter, is going to be the one that reaps the rewards over the other.
Yeah, and I look at Aiden Hill coming off what did he sign? 2 years at 4.9 million a year.
Like 4.9, yeah.
Yeah, so he's not necessarily has something to play for, but he has something to prove that he's earned. And the thing with Aiden Hill that a lot of people don't realize is that he's not like Jordan Billington, where he's just some guy that came up from the AHL. He had decent numbers in San Jose and Arizona, which were not.
San Jose got him from Arizona.
He was not on good teams at all. He still put up decent numbers. Like he's like a career 913, I think. Not playing any more than 25 games a year. But like I'm a big fan of Aiden Hill, and he's finally coming into his own. I think he starts the year as the starter. That's the goal. But Logan Thompson as well. Like he was right there alongside Stuart Skinner for that Calder vote. Like they were pretty well identical goalies throughout this year. So yeah, like you can't go wrong with either of them either. They're kind of a step down from the Omar Swayman tandem, but all the same things I said are applicable to both.
Yeah, I just want to kind of loop them in because it's the same basic argument, but I think Vegas is just a slightly better team. You mentioned Stuart Skinner. I would also have him on this list. Great rookie season. I think he's going to hit a real positive point in his development for the upcoming year as he really claims that starter spot in Edmonton. You're not really going to bet against Edmonton as far as them getting a bunch of wins. The only problem is, will their defense improve and will Skinner's numbers improve? I think he's a great low risk, high reward option. And he's somebody that I would really pay attention to, maybe grabbing in like your third round or fourth round in that higher mid portion. I think he would be in a similar boat as some of these other goalies we're going to talk about, but I think he would be the one that I would want to take the risk on just because of how well he played last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really interested to see if, like, I wouldn't be surprised to see him go in the third round, like at the end of the third round or the seventh round. Like, I'm really interested to see where he's going to go in this draft because, like you said, Edmonton's going to let in a lot of goals this year. They just outscore all their problems. Ekholm coming in is a huge plus for them. Evan Bouchard is fantastic. Darnell Nurse, not quite as good as the $9 million contract he signed, or whatever it was, 8.5.
I think it's 9.5.
Is it 9.5? Oh my god, that's such
I think
a bad.
It might be 9.5 because I think it was the same as Seth Jones got.
That's what I was thinking, but it just I can't believe it. But they do have good defensemen on that team. They just need to kind of get that team defense all together. But yeah, like I like Edmonton a lot. I had them to go to the Cup this year. I think they're probably going to be up there next year for one of my picks. And I do think that Stuart Skinner is just going to be like a really steady Eddie goalie. He's going to probably finish with like a 911 save percentage, like a 2.23 goals against, and like 32 wins probably. So, because
very specific, and I like the prediction.
Because you can't forget about Jack Campbell. Obviously, last year did not have a
Yeah,
good year at all. There was talks about like
he'll bounce back.
he'll bounce back. He'll have a better year. I'm not even convinced that Stuart Skinner is starter on day one. But
But
who
it's his
knows?
to claim, I think is really the
Yeah,
key point is that it's Skinner's net to take as the young up and coming goaltender to really take it from Campbell and stick him back either in that 1B spot or make Edmonton think, all right, should we trade this other guy? But I think it's Skinner's to win.
yeah,
Let's loop a couple together here while we're on that topic of teams that kind of have decent defenses but try to outscore their problems. Same type of player. I'm gonna loop in Samsonov as well as Georgiev. Toronto and the Avalanche, they're both still very good teams, and they're going to keep getting wins. And they're in kind of the same boat as Skinner, except for the fact that they're a little bit more established as goaltenders. So I think they should be taken in a similar spot as Skinner, maybe slightly lower, depending on how much you think Colorado will do comparatively to Edmonton or Toronto. You can really weigh in which team you believe in more to get more wins. But they're all going to be around the same type of stats, same amount of games played, basically. Probably the same or similar save percentage, similar goals against, probably hovering around that 2.5, I would say, maybe 2.6. And I think any one of them will be reliable starting options to kind of fill in your second slot if you have a star goaltender, or to kind of run as a tandem if you can get a second similar starter for your bench.
yeah. Are you saying that you don't think Matt Murray is going to be the starter next year in Toronto?
No, I don't think so. I think Samsonov's going to win it. I love Matt Murray. Don't get me wrong. I love Matt Murray. I still think he doesn't get enough credit for what he can do as a goaltender. I think he is better than some of his numbers do show. But it's that injury history. That injury history alone just makes me wary to take him high as a goaltender. If you want to grab him in the lower portions of your draft to be like, maybe he can beat out Samsonov, or maybe Samsonov randomly gets injured too, by all means, Matt Murray's still good. The fantasy doesn't really apply much to playoff time. That's when I would want to be playing Matt Murray, because playoff Matt Murray is an absolute menace. But during the regular season, I would take Samsonov over Murray if you're going Toronto goaltenders.
Absolutely. And Samsonov is like you said, Toronto likes to outscore their problems, but they do have a quality defensive group, kind of like Edmonton. Like they have some really good pieces there. It's just like the whole team defense isn't stellar.
No.
I do like Toronto's group quite a bit though. Although now that I think about it, like adding John Klingberg on a defensive group with Morgan Riley and an aging Mark Giordano, I don't know. I don't know how it's going to work out this year. It's either going to be it's like your goalies that we talked about earlier. It's either going to be really good or really bad risk. So
Really bad.
Yeah. But no, I do think that Samsonov is going to have a good year. I don't think he's going to have a great year. This is similar to what he did this year. That's about where I expect. But you also have to remember that he is going to be signing a 1-year deal in the next few days. He's going to be a UFA afterwards, so he's going to be playing his butt off for a contract. So I think he's going to have a really good year. But I'm not 100% sold on him. So okay. I think this is a good place to pick him, but not for me personally. I would go with Georgiev over Samsonov every day. I think Georgiev is really underrated goalie, and Colorado, I would say, got better this offseason. I like Miles Wood. I like Ross Colton. Love Jonathan Drouin on that team. So
love that.
Yeah, I think that they got a lot better. And he's a great goalie anyway. So he had a good year last year. He received one Vezina vote last year, I believe, a fourth place vote, I think. So he proved it last year. He can do it again this year.
Yeah, I like the Avalanches as a team better than Toronto for as far as like points go and winning games. I think they're a better fantasy asset than some Toronto players. So I'm going to agree with you on Georgiev over Samsonov. Got one more to round out the group, and kind of a dark horse, but also kind of not at the same time. New Jersey's Vitek Vanacek. I think he has been a starter, and he's shown that he can be a starter. He's a little bit shaky at times, but being on that young, really good, high-flying New Jersey team, I think, has benefited him. I think having that stable backup in Smid from last year, I think they're going to kind of run not so much as a tandem. I think Vanacek will win more of the starts over Schmid. I think he's the better goaltender of the two currently. So
Yeah.
I would still take him as a low risk option just for a goalie that'll win you games with average stats otherwise. And I don't think you would be really disappointed with any results you get out of him.
Yeah, I would be more than happy for him to be my second goalie taken.
Yep.
Like, definitely worth having on your team, but wouldn't be my go-to guy that I'm looking to get all my goalie stats out of. You mentioned Akira Schmid. I'm a huge fan of Schmid, and I do think that he's going to challenge for the starter this year. But either way, like they're playing behind a fantastic team. The New Jersey Devils are like they're going to be unbeatable this year. One of the best top sixes in the NHL. Great defensive group, strong bottom set. Like everything about them is great except for the goaltending that could prove to be great with either Vanacek or Schmid. So.
But the goaltending is good. That's the great thing about it.
Yeah.
All right. Let's kind of go towards more while we're on the topic of young goalies. It's probably we talked about Schmid. Are there any other young or semi-young goalies that you feel you would pick up in those mid-late to late rounds that might surprise people? Because I have a few here that one of them is not super surprising, but I think there's a few potential candidates for young goalies that'll really put up some great numbers this year.
Well, I know you're thinking of Devin Levi. He's going to have a great year. Who do you think is the projected starter? Is going to be Luukkonen or Levi?
Based off of how last year went, I would say Levi gets the start on night one. It really is going to come down to who plays better during the preseason, because I think they're going to split it down the middle between the two of them. I don't see why anybody else. Maybe Comrie gets a start just to kind of fill in and get him warmed up, but he's really going to be the third one. I don't think Comrie challenges for the starter position at all. I think he's just the rotational goalie for the sake of, I'll give this guy some rest and then sit Comrie on the bench type thing. Could maybe do it that way, but I think Levi takes the reins as the starter. I'm not sure if he's going to be thrown in for 60 games this year, but I think he's got the potential to play maybe 48 to about 52 games. I think that would be a little bit more reasonable. And I think he can have the opportunity to drop, I'd say 25 to maybe 28 wins on the high end. If he hits 30, then my God, he's winning that Calder trophy with flying colors. But I think he's a great option just because of how good Buffalo is offensively, trying to outscore the problems, and he's stable enough that he can still put up decent enough numbers, and he's going to get the wins from when Buffalo wins.
Yeah, that's very fair assessment. And I do think that Devin Levi is one of the probably top two, maybe three young goalies outside of the NHL right now. He's going to be their starter next season for sure. This year, like you said, it's going to be more of a transition year for him. Might only play 30 games, might play 50. Who knows? It's just kind of going to be see how it goes. I completely forgot about Eric Comrie and how he's still signed by Buffalo. I like Comrie. He's a good tandem for either Luukkonen or Levi, depending on how things are going to work out with that team. But one other player that I kind of want to throw in there, and I'm trying to think of how it's going to work out. But Dustin Wolf, if he can manage to get into the NHL, I think he's going to be right there with Levi as one of the best rookies of the year next year. It's going to be one tight Calder race next year because you got Connor Bedard, probably Shane Wright, Adam Fantilli, Leo Carlson, all these guys, plus all the guys that are already drafted. Then you have the goalies. Goalies are harder to judge with the rest of the players, but like Dustin Wolf and Devin Levi are two of the brightest futures outside the NHL right now.
Yeah, I love Wolf. I think he's got a great opportunity in Calgary with how kind of wide open things are getting over there. So I love Wolf as a prospect. I love Wolf as a goaltender, and I am excited to see what he can do. Another goalie I have on my might surprise you list is Korpisalo. I think where he moved to from where he was just kind of stuck in Columbus, just on that really poor team, and the move across. I think his new position is going to do wonders for him. I think he's a good enough goaltender to get some solid stats, and I really, really like the way he plays. I think his wins are going to jump up this year. I think his save percentage is going to go up significantly. I think his goals against will maybe, I'm not going to say drop, but I think they'll go down just a little bit for the sake of, the team that he's on. But I really like him as a low risk, high reward, low end pick, because I think he has that potential, and I think he's one of the better he's not super young, but younger goaltenders to kind of step into that starting role and really take the reins with it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are kind of underestimating Ottawa, and especially their defense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people are forgetting that they have Shabbat, Sanderson, and Chychrun on defense.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like that Chychrun deal got forgotten like instantly. But that's a really good defense group in front of him. Plus, you also have Eric Brandstrom, who can move the puck well, Artem Zub, who's great defensively, and either Jacob Bernard-Docker or Travis Hamonic, who are perfectly fine on the third pair. That's a really good defensive group in front of him. And Ottawa's top six is going to have the puck a lot. The bottom six is horrible right now. They definitely need an upgrade there. But like, Ottawa's a good team coming into this year, and Korpisalo is in a good position to get a lot of wins, get a lot of saves. Ottawa lets a lot of shots go by, but they're not high danger shots. And with Anton Forsberg, right now he doesn't have any knees. He's supposed to be just coming back from an MCL injury. He actually tore both of them on the same play. I don't know if you would remember that, but he tore both of his MCLs on the same play, had to get stretchered off the ice, and that ended his season. Right about now is when he's supposed to be back on the ice practicing. Haven't seen any updates on that. So as of right now, who knows what it's going to be like for Forsberg to come back with no knees. Korpisalo is going to be the number one guy. Maybe it's Mads Søgaard backing him up. Who knows? But I think Korpisalo can, and he had his hip surgery and came back better than ever. So, and that's a huge thing that people kind of miss. And I believe it was the Sens Talk podcast. They were talking about the Korpisalo hip injury and how that once he got it done, he came back better than ever. And people are kind of missing out on that, and they're not taking that into account. They're saying, he had one outlier good year. Maybe he just got a lot better after he felt comfortable and healthy. So,
yeah, the whole Atlantic goaltending group is really poised for some big years. And there's another person on my list that is in that Atlantic group. I want to just briefly touch on Ville Husso out of Detroit. I think he was really good last year on a really mid-tier team. They weren't bad. They weren't great, but they weren't bad either. And I think Detroit, being as improved as they are, you're going to see some good numbers out of Husso, because I think he's a very stable goaltender. He's not, that star power, top 5 goalie in the league, but he is probably one of the more reliable starters in the league currently, in my opinion. And I think he's going to get a nice little boost from Detroit being a good team this year.
With the utmost respect, I'm going to completely disagree.
Go ahead.
So last year was his second full year as a starter. He had one amazing year in St. Louis. He finished with a 919, I believe. And last year he went down to a 956 or 856. Sorry, 896. And I think he played 54 games last year on a not good team. Obviously, his save percentage doesn't tell the whole story. Detroit really struggled in net, no matter who they put in. I think Magnus Hellberg put up the best numbers, and he only played like 2 or 3 games. They don't have the best defense in front of them. I like Seider. I like Wallman. I like Mata too. But then you have Sherratt, you have Hall. Maybe Edvinson is going to be number 6. I like him a lot. But they just need to kind of solidify themselves as a stronger defensive group in front of a goaltender like Husso. I do really like Husso, but I need to see him kind of bounce back before I'm comfortable taking him. Right now, I think he's on my do not draft list.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
That's why we have discussions. I love it. One more on it's like surprise, but it's also not a surprise because of how well he played. Philip Gustafson for the Wild. I think he's a good pick. I think the Wild are going to be a good enough team that he's going to be a decent fantasy option. I'm not saying take him super high. I'm saying if you have some pick in your last maybe 4 or 5 rounds, I think Gustafson would be a good pickup just for the sake of Minnesota is still a pretty good team.
Yeah, I don't like talking about Gustafson. That hurts my feelings as an Ottawa guy.
I'm sorry.
Ottawa is so prone to trading young goaltenders who just break out into superstars. They traded Ben Bishop, Robin Lehner, now Philip Gustafson. I hate it, but I love that Gus is doing really well for himself. Don't know what his contract is going to look like. That'll be really interesting. But I think he's going to have a great year in Minnesota again, especially trading him for Cam Talbot. That really hurts. But I do think that he's going to have another good year. I think he's going to take a bit of a step back. I think last year might be a bit of an outlier. He had like an incredible season. I don't know how he didn't get any.
Stupid good numbers.
I don't even think he got any Vezina votes, which is insane. I could be mistaken, but I don't recall seeing him on the Vezina votes.
I don't remember either.
But he definitely should have been. I think he's going to come back into next year 9-15 goaltender with good wins, good goals against average, and like I think he's going to be a great starting goaltender for them. But I do think he's taking a bit of a step back. Definitely worth taking him in really anywhere you feel comfortable. Because if you're really high on Minnesota, that they're going to get a lot of wins, he's probably worth taking around like 5, 6, 7, depending on who's still available. But I'm not as high on Minnesota. I think they're kind of stuck in mediocrity. I don't think that's a hot take. But round 8, 9, 10, I'd probably feel really comfortable taking him if he's there. So
yeah, I think he's a good second, maybe third goaltender to have on your bench because he's still good enough, and Minnesota is still good enough. Not great, just good enough. So I think he's someone that can still get you some decent fantasy stats.
Yeah, and he's in the exact same boat as Vanacek for me. Those are interchangeable goalies for me for next season.
All right, let's hop into the last sec. Goalies to avoid. I have a few on this list. Do you have anybody that jumps out to you?
Well, I already talked about Ville Husso, who I wouldn't feel comfortable taking this year. And I really hope he proves me wrong. I really like Husso. But again, he's on my do not draft list. I'm looking at your list here, and who sticks out to me the most is Tristan Jarry. I don't know what I would say that Pittsburgh got better. I don't know how much better they got this year. I know, according to Dom Lucian from The Athletic, they're one of the most improved teams. Wait until we see them on the ice to see how that happens. But Tristan Jarry still isn't a great goalie. I think he's very, very overpaid and isn't going to be. I would stay away from all the Pittsburgh goalies. They don't have a fantastic defense in front of them. Whether it's going to be DeSmith or Nedeljkovic, who is backup, still wouldn't take either of them.
Yeah, no, I've never personally been a huge fan of Tristan Jarry as a fantasy goaltender. I think he's just supremely overrated, and any of his stats were inflated by being on those good Pittsburgh teams in the past. So I think they really got to see what he was this year as the Penguins started to decline. It was a little bit more of a show of this is what you get out of this type of a goaltender. And I don't think he's going to have any improved stats. I think his numbers are going to go down. I think the Penguins' numbers are going to go down. I wouldn't touch him with a 10-foot pole, and I wouldn't even bother, like you said, taking any of the Pittsburgh goaltenders unless you absolutely just need to fill a slot. And then maybe that would be the only circumstance that you would want to do that. But I wouldn't touch him. I would avoid him like the plague, just personally.
Yeah.
This one kind of ties into somebody we talked about before. I want to throw Marc-Andre Fleury on that list, just because I think Gustafsson passed him. I don't think he's going to be throwing up any Vezina caliber numbers like he has in the past. Age is still a factor with him. He's getting up there. He's getting real close to 40. So I don't think that he's going to put up stellar numbers. I don't think he's going to be a starter. I think he's not worth taking at all, just because average team with an old average goaltender, I don't think it's a recipe for fantasy success. I wouldn't touch him.
No, I couldn't agree more. I don't even have anything else to add to that. Like, obviously he a Hall of Fame goaltender, can't discredit.
Oh, absolutely.
Can't discredit his career at all. But right now, like, he's just at the tail end. He's still good. Like, he's going to get 15, 20 wins maybe as the backup. But I don't think he's worth taking in fantasy, even just based on games played alone. Like, he's not going to play enough to really be a reliable guy, especially if you have like a higher required amount of games by a goaltender. Like, if you're at 4 or 5, I don't think he's worth a roster spot right now.
I don't even think, my kind of hot take is I don't even think he passes 10 wins this year. I really don't.
Wow.
I don't think he does. That's
Wow.
just my personal take. I think this is the year he really hits that downward decline, and it's just going to catch up to him real fast. I don't think he hits the 10 win mark.
Interesting. I feel like we've had a lot of hot takes today.
That's the point. We got to get more discussion out of everybody else. They can agree and yell at us in the comments.
Yeah.
Another one I want to throw in. We got a couple more here. We talked about Cam Talbot. He would be on my list of avoid like the plague. Injuries alone make me not want to deal with Cam Talbot on my roster. I don't want to deal with it. I don't feel like holding him on an IR slot for half the season like I've done in the past. I'm over it. I'm done with it. I can't do it anymore.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess I keep bringing up Ottawa, but like, we got to the point last year in the season that Ottawa was playing must-win games if they wanted to stay in the playoff race at the end of the year. And he was a healthy scratch. He was in the press box watching while 2 rookies played. Like, he lost all confidence from the team. And sure, he dealt with a lot of injuries, a lot of like other things going on, whatever. But he just he lost the confidence in the team and his play. So I don't know. There's one game that stuck out to me that is the sole reason I will not draft him. Ottawa at one point was out shooting Philadelphia. I believe it was 24-4, and Ottawa lost the game.
I've been there before.
I think Ottawa lost 5-3 or 5-4 that game. I might be wrong. They might have won the game in overtime, but it got to overtime when the shots were 24-4.
That's disgusting, and I apologize for that experience. I want no part of anything involving that.
Yeah.
Let's hop to another one. I have an asterisk next to his name, Carter Hart. I don't think Philly is going to be a good team this year. I think if he's still there, avoid him just because of he's on Philly. He's not a bad goaltender. His fantasy stats last year were not great, but again, that was a resulting factor of his team not being very good. He wasn't incredible at some points, but he was incredible at other points. So he's kind of a hot cold. So if he gets moved to a better team, I'd say pick him up. If he's still on Philly, I wouldn't touch him.
Yeah. And I mean, on Philadelphia, I just brought up his stats here because I kind of flew under the radar last year. I didn't really follow how well he did. But he played 55 games, 22 wins, 10 overtime losses, and a .907 save percentage. Like, not bad for what did Philadelphia finish? 5th from the bottom of the league. Not bad at all for him. But again, like, there's so many better options if you're looking for a goaltender. I think he is worth taking a flyer on. even if he sticks with Philly. But as a later round pick, Philadelphia, I would say, got worse this offseason. They're not going to be finishing much better, especially with Michkov not coming over yet. But if he gets flipped to a better team, then he might be one of the higher goalies, in my opinion. He might be in that first
He's a good option if he gets moved. He's a not great option if he doesn't. That's kind of why I had the asterisk next to him.
Yeah.
Because he can go both ways depending on the situation.
Yeah.
Last one I have to kind of round out my group here. Elvis Merzlikins. He had bad numbers on a bad team. And even though Columbus is better this year, I'm not sure if he's still worth taking. I don't know if Columbus is good enough that they're going to make that big of a jump to make Merzlikins worth grabbing as one of your top two goaltenders, or even as your third. If you have a fourth slot, I still might not even take him. I just don't think that Columbus has that big of an improvement in them yet. I could be wrong. It would be fun to see if they prove me wrong. It would be really cool to see him because Merzlikins is just one of my favorite goalies in the league for the sake of his name alone. I like watching him play. I don't think he's a horrible goaltender. I just think he had a really, really, really bad year. And I don't think he's going to have a really, really, really good year this year either. So I'd say wait another year or two to see how Columbus is and then maybe start considering him. But for now, I wouldn't touch him.
Yeah, he's a high risk, high reward goalie. I wouldn't hang on to him for too long at the beginning of the season if he starts out poor. But I think he's worth one of your later picks. I would take him as a third goalie, absolutely, in one of the last rounds. I think last year was his first year under a 908, 909 save percentage, including his first year where he had I believe it was a 924 4 years ago.
Oh, he had some real good numbers for sure.
Yeah, he's had some really good seasons. I believe he's only played 4 years in the NHL, maybe 5. I don't know.
4 is right.
But he has an opportunity to take a big step here. He's not battling it out with Korpisalo. He has a couple young goalies coming up behind him that he's going to provide some competition in the net. But I do think that he is poised for a big year. What did he finish last year with? 885, something really low like that.
Hold on, let me find it.
I think
it was not good.
Yeah, it was something really low, and he had a really bad record as well. So I think he's one of those goalies that you take right off the hop and give him a really short leash. And while you look that up, I'll actually kind of continue on, circle back to Anton Forsberg.
876, a 423 and an 876.
Oh, that's I would give him a 5-game leash headed into next year.
He's got a career 3.13 goals against and a 906. The save percent, the career save percentage ain't bad, but that goals against, oh boy.
Yeah. Wow.
And we were right. 4 seasons, 33 games in 1920, 28 games in 2021, 59 in 21-22, and 30 last year. He had 7 wins last year.
Wow. 7 wins last year. That's really bad.
7, 18, and 2 was his record. And he played 30 games.
I think I would still be comfortable with a really short leash.
Okay.
The gate. A very short leash, and I would not be afraid to put him on waivers. And like I was saying, I'll bring this back to the Anton Forsberg conversation. Exact same thing with him. It is very hard to come back from having no knees, like I said.
Yeah.
And he proved that he can be a great goaltender in Ottawa, but can he do it next year as a 1B and off of a really bad rehab injury? So after rehabbing a really bad injury, sorry. I don't know.
We'll end up having to see on that. Is there any other goalies that you really want to throw in, you want to talk about? We can kind of categorize them. Anybody that you're like, hey, maybe I'd pick them up.
I'm thinking about John Gibson, but I don't know how I feel about it. I think I would avoid him just because I'm so torn. Great goaltender. Is he though? Like
He was. I still think he's good.
And I don't know. I have no idea what to think about John Gibson anymore.
I think it's tough just because of how bad last year was to really categorize him. Most people are probably like, it's like, is he really still a good goaltender? Or at some point do you go, well, he was sitting with ridiculous goals again. Let me look up his too while I'm on here. Gibson.
Yeah, because it
wasn't great.
No, not at all. Like he was a top 4 goalie in the NHL for a few years and then just fell off really quickly. And that is 100% partly because Anaheim fell off really quickly.
Yeah.
But how long can you blame it on the team?
Exactly.
Especially when the analytics don't back it up.
53 games played, 14 wins, 31 losses, 8 OT. He had a 3.99 goals against, so almost a 4 goals against, and an 899 save percentage. The 899 isn't horrible considering how bad the rest of it is, but anything sub 9 still makes me want. It's lower than it should be for somebody of his talent level. He's a 30-year-old goaltender who's established and is supposed to be better.
What about the 2 years before, if you still have it up?
Yeah, I still got it up. 21, 22, he had a 904, a 903. So going back a few years, so last year 899, year before 904, 903 the year previous, 904 the year previous, and then 1819 was his last really solid save percentage here, 917, and then the previous ones are like ridiculous, 926, 924, 920, 914. Like,
so that doesn't just go.
He's fallen off a bit.
He's fallen off a bit, but that doesn't just go away. He's definitely not a sub 900 goaltender anymore, or still.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that will be a little bit of an outlier. Obviously, there's not much of a difference between a 904 and an 899.
No,
but I do.
But it
think
looks better.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do think that once Anaheim takes even just the slightest bit of a step, which I think they are this year with Radko Gudas, Alex Killorn, Leo Carlson. I almost said Adam Fantilli because that was like a lock, but
yeah, it was supposed to be, but it's not.
I do think that he gets back up like to 908, 909 this year.
Okay.
But that's just a prediction. He could fall down to 896. I don't know. Goalies.
He's good for getting a lot of saves. Anaheim gives up a lot of shots.
Yeah.
That's the only thing you can really throw value at right now.
Yeah. So I don't know. He's a big risk of a goalie, like we talked about right at the beginning about him. He's a big risk. Could be a great reward if you can get him really late.
I'm wary, but I'm going to agree with you. If you get the late pick,
yeah.
If you believe in Anaheim, like I did last year, very, very mistakenly, grab him and see it. He'll give you some bonus points throughout the rest of this year. You got any other ones? Because that about sums up my list.
Yeah, no, I think that's all I got. Obviously, there's some young goalies. We mentioned Kochetkov earlier.
Yep.
He might get some good games, have a good run. He's waiver eligible this year, waiver exempt this year. So he's probably going to be the number 3 with Ranta and Anderson. That's who I wanted to talk about. Antti Ranta, really quick.
Okay. Yeah, throw it. Yeah, that's why I'm asking.
Antti Ranta did not play many games last year. Do you know what his record was last year without looking it up?
It was some stupid high win percentage. Didn't he have like 20 wins and like 3 losses or something ridiculous?
That's quite impressive that you knew that. It's 19-3-3.
Yeah.
Like, that is foolish. So
I had him for a little while myself because I was like, he's just winning games. I'll pick him up real quick.
Yeah. He was fantastic when he played. But like, he didn't look amazing while he was playing. He just always got the win. He just did exactly what the team needed. I think he finished with a 911 save percentage or something. Like, it wasn't stellar, but it was really good. So he's a good late round pickup too.
Let's just look. Just for the sake of why the heck not?
Any Carolina goaltender is going to look good, but the three that they have are good goaltenders playing behind a really good team.
Well, it won't load. Of course. Right when I'm actually trying to find something simple.
Yeah.
One more time.
But yeah, like I think any of Carolina's goaltenders you're getting a win with, unless you get Kochetkov and he spends the year in the AHL like I did, which incredibly frustrating. But yeah, the fact that they locked up their three goaltenders for such a cheap amount of money is foolish.
Yeah. We're on to last year, 223 and a 910. You have 4 shutouts.
Yeah.
4 shutouts in 27 games.
Yeah.
That's outstanding.
And I mean, that just goes to kind of show what I was saying. Like, he got 19 wins in 25 games, 4 shutouts, but only a 910 save percentage. I mean, I say only, that's probably above the median of the league, but like,
still pretty good.
With those stats, you would think that you're talking about like a 919 or a 923 goalie. But,
yeah. That just means Carolina wasn't giving up a lot of shots. That's all that really means.
Exactly. Like, all of his games were like 20 shot games, 22 shots.
Yeah.
So.
But that fares well for the other goalies, for Chekhov and Anderson. So watch Carolina closely is basically what we're trying to say.
Yeah. Goalie farm.
Yeah, goalie farm. Fantastic choices. If anybody else has any other goalies they want to chat about or get our opinions on, you're welcome to throw them down in the comments on YouTube or anywhere else that you have the option to. You can always tweet it at us. There's always options to get in the conversation. We'd love to hear what everybody has to say. But as far as this episode goes, I want to thank everybody again for tuning in to this week's episode of Fantasy Forecheck. On our next show, we're going to be going through defenders that you should really be looking for next season. I think there's going to be some hot takes there too. It's going to be really fun to go through the top, mid, and low end group of that. There's been a decent amount of movement throughout the league, so I think it'll be really fun. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your preferred listening channel and to the Hockey Writers podcast and YouTube channels, where you can find everything else hockey related. You're also welcome to follow me on Twitter at Strozyk7.
And my Twitter is at JacobBillingT10.
And like I said, you guys can always tweet at us any fantasy questions or suggestions or anything you want to contribute to the conversation. We're happy to reply there. Feel free to drop us a like, and we will keep you up to date on all things fantasy throughout the year. Thanks everybody again for watching and tuning in. We will see you next time.